Welcome to the African Strata, where every layer tells a new story. Support the channel. Like, subscribe, and share for more real African stories.
In October last year, a European think tank posted satellite footage of what it called unidentified military-style compounds in West Africa. The buildings were arranged with striking precision. No logos, no fences, no flags. Just rows upon rows of clay-colored rooftops stretching beyond the horizon. French media speculated they were barracks. British outlets warned of hidden Chinese influence. One analyst even said, "This could be Africa's silent militarization." They were wrong. Those rooftops weren't weapons. They were homes. 1.2 million of them. All built in under 2 years. No loans, no foreign contractors, no debt. Just dirt, sunlight, and thousands of villagers who said, "We've waited long enough." So what exactly happened in Burkina Faso? And why is no one in the West talking about it? They say revolutions start with a protest. But in Burkina Faso, it began with a drought, a broken well, and a plastic tarp barely keeping 7 children dry. In 2022, the country was still reeling. Nearly 2 million people displaced, one of the world's highest rates of internal migration. Rural families moved to overcrowded cities. Slums spilled over roadsides, and more than 70% of homes lacked proper sanitation. Then came a televised address that barely made international news. President Ibrahim Traoré stood in front of Parliament, not with military demands, not with a bailout request, but with a blueprint for 1.2 million homes. Free, permanent, locally built, debt-free. Most thought he was bluffing. The IMF had just offered $600 million in infrastructure loans, which he declined outright. Western economists labeled it populist fantasy. One EU official was quoted saying, "This kind of project is charming, but entirely unsustainable." But Traoré didn't backtrack. Instead, he introduced the Land Justice Reform Act, which declared that any land unused for more than 5 years, especially if owned by foreign firms or colonial heirs, would be reclaimed by the state. No compensation. That triggered the first wave of outrage. French media called it property theft in broad daylight. A German development bank quietly froze agricultural aid. But inside the country, something unexpected happened. People volunteered. Mothers, farmers, out-of-work masons, all signed up to build homes they would later own. Not rent, own. Because for many, it wasn't about policy. It was about dignity. Can you imagine your government handing out land seized from absentee corporations, then asking you to help build your own house? Would you do it? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to share this if it challenges what you've been told about developing countries. She had 7 grandchildren and no roof. Aminata lived in a collapsed mud house outside Kaya. For months, her only protection was a torn sheet of plastic tied between sticks. When the wind came, the children didn't cry. They just curled tighter. That's where Traoré showed up. No camera crews, no convoy, just boots, dust, and silence. He didn't make a speech. He looked at Aminata's tarp. Then he said, "You will never live like this again." That moment didn't go viral. But inside the country, it rippled. Days later, Parliament passed a resolution approving immediate housing mobilization. Foreign firms were blocked. Only Burkinabe labor was allowed. Then came the architect Kossi Dao, born in Bobo Dioulasso, educated in Paris. He had just won an award for designing a $20 million eco-museum in Lyon. But when Traoré called, Kossi didn't hesitate. He flew home with only a sketchbook. 1 week later, they announced the blueprint. Locally sourced clay, solar-powered rooftops, rainwater harvest systems, built in under 4 weeks, cost $2,800 per unit. By comparison, the EU spends an average of $173,000 per affordable housing unit. In the US, that number balloons to over $250,000. Yet when Burkina Faso tried it for $20,800, Western headlines called it utopian. Let's be honest, If Denmark built this, it'd be on the cover of Time. Why is it that when an African nation builds without asking for permission, it's dismissed as naive? Would this be taken more seriously if it came with white hands and a European accent? If you feel that double standard, hit like. And tell us, what do you call this? Utopia or justice? Within 3 months, over 300,000 people had moved into permanent housing. They didn't sign leases. They planted trees in their new front yards. Construction spread like a pulse, north to Uahaguya, south to Puo. Each unit stamped with a metal plate, built by the people, owned by the people. Then came the reports. CNN called it a radical housing experiment. France 24 labeled it potentially destabilizing. Bloomberg raised concerns over resource mismanagement. But none of them visited the villages. What they missed was this. The homes weren't just shelter, they were strategy. Each housing cluster came with a solar station, a community school, and a rainwater basin. Electricity? Free. Rent? Zero. Maintenance? Covered by cooperatives, each family contributes $2 a month, not to the government, but to their village council. Meanwhile, Paris held a press conference. A spokesperson warned of Burkina Faso's increasing alignment with rogue models of governance. Rogue? Because they declined French contractors? Because they reclaimed idle land? Because they didn't ask permission? The twist? Germany, quietly, offered to study the model, but only if it could be framed as post-conflict stabilization. That's the word they needed to justify interest, not innovation. Stabilization. Because recognizing it as innovation would mean admitting they were never the only ones with answers. Why is African success only acknowledged if it's branded as recovery, not brilliance? Why must it come with trauma, not strategy? If this project were French-led, would it still be destabilizing? If you see the hypocrisy, drop a comment. Let's talk about it. Share this if you're tired of the double standards. Success, when it doesn't follow instructions, always comes with a price. By mid-2023, international pressure had escalated from skepticism to active retaliation. The IMF downgraded Burkina Faso's investment rating, warning of non-conventional policy behavior. The World Bank suspended $312 million in infrastructure support, citing lack of transparency and cooperation. That same month, France froze $68 million in aid, stating, "Property seizures without compensation cannot be tolerated." One of the plots in question? Abandoned for 19 years. Owned by a French investment firm registered in the Cayman Islands. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same institutions that spent decades urging African nations to develop housing were now punishing the first to do it without debt. Inside the country, critics sharpened their knives. Where are the hospitals? What about roads, irrigation, jobs? Are we trading one kind of control for another? Even some opposition figures, formerly silent, began calling the housing movement a nationalist illusion. In response, the government unveiled its second phase, 700 new rural clinics embedded directly into housing clusters. Mobile teacher teams launched in zones without schools. A 1% land tax on corporate real estate used to fund community-owned grocery hubs near the new homes. But backlash wasn't just political, it was digital. A sudden spike in AI-generated misinformation began appearing on social platforms. False images of military barracks disguised as houses. Videos alleging Chinese soldiers living in the clay structures. Deepfakes of Traoré declaring war on foreign investors, none of which he ever said. One clip was traced back to a London-based media firm, later revealed to have contractual ties with a French public relations group that advised real estate lobbies. It wasn't random. Because if this worked, if the poorest country on the continent could house millions using its own hands and its own soil, what would that say about everyone else? Would it expose that poverty was never just a lack of money, but a system of permission? That's what stung, because this wasn't a project asking for approval. It wasn't asking at all. By August 2024, over 1.18 million homes had been completed. Concrete, clay, steel reinforced, no tin roofs, no flood zones, each with a functioning toilet, solar panels, and a communal well within 300 meters. Nearly 6.7 million people, more than a quarter of the population, had either moved into new homes or directly participated in building one. In the city of Fata Ngorma, malaria rates among children dropped by 42%. In Tinkodogo, school attendance in new housing zones rose by 31% in just 2 terms. In Dori, reports of domestic violence declined by 23%, as families no longer fought over space and privacy. And in Bobo Dioulasso, a woman named Salamata opened a tailoring shop in what used to be her living room floor. Now it's an actual room, with a door and 4 walls. And her name on the title deed. That detail matters, because for decades, development meant numbers on spreadsheets, GDP, HDI, trade growth. But now? A grandmother in Burkina Faso can walk into a bank, show proof of property, and open a credit line. She doesn't need permission. She doesn't need a savior. She needs what everyone else has, a key and a name on paper. But here's the thing nobody talks about. In San Francisco, over 38,000 people live unsheltered. In London, 1 in 4 renters spends more than half their income on housing. In Paris, emergency shelters for migrants are at 112% capacity. Yet none of these countries have built 1 million homes in 20 months. None of them have done it debt-free. And none of them call themselves developing. So tell me, what's underdeveloped supposed to mean now? If dignity can rise from clay and sunlight, what excuse does steel and wealth have? Don't answer too quickly. Sit with it. Then, if it resonates, share it. Abiba doesn't speak French. She never finished school. But in her new home, she knows 3 things by heart: her address, her plot number, and the name on her ownership paper, her own. She used to sleep on a pile of wood scraps. Now, she sews school uniforms in her front room while her daughter reads by solar light. When asked by a local journalist what changed her life, she said, "They stopped calling me a problem. They let me build something, and they didn't take it away." In a small town near Bonfora, a mason named Musa leads a team of volunteers. They work without salary, building houses for widows and disabled veterans. When asked why, he laughed and said, "I used to build villas in Côte d'Ivoire. Now I build for people who look like me. That pays more." But this isn't charity. Each recipient has skin in the game, either through labor, logistics, or community service. In exchange, they get something the market has never truly offered them: security, not just of property, but of place. And it's spreading. Across villages, people are painting murals on their homes, symbols, proverbs, family histories. Children are naming their blocks like streets: Lions Road, Grandma's Lane. One teenager renamed his home Burkina Faso, a play on Burkina Faso and cafe, because his mother sells tea on the front steps now. These aren't houses, they're memory machines. They're proof that stability isn't built by banks or borders, but by belonging. And yet, few international leaders have acknowledged the program. No UN resolution, no OECD endorsement, no World Habitat Award. Just a few side mentions buried under headlines about geopolitics and coups. Because this wasn't led by a Western NGO. It wasn't a pilot program tested in Sweden. It was raw, native, chaotic. And it worked. This is not a perfect story. There were delays. Some homes collapsed after early rains. In a few regions, cement mafias tried to hijack supplies. In others, families argued over who would get the title, father or mother. No miracle survives reality untouched. But here's what did happen. Over 1 million people no longer live in fear of eviction. Children study by clean light. Grandmothers lock their doors at night, not against thieves, but against dust. Land once hoarded for speculation now holds laughter, laundry, and growing trees. So why does it still make people uncomfortable? Maybe because it didn't wait, didn't ask, didn't follow the script. didn't come in English or with a sustainability summit, didn't brand itself with blue logos and smiling white consultants. It came with dirt under fingernails, voices in native tongues, decisions made without middlemen. And that's hard to categorize. Is it socialism? Is it nationalism? Is it an act of rebellion? Is it a threat to international order? Or is it simply what it looks like? People taking back what should have never been out of reach. You don't have to agree with everything. You just have to ask yourself, if a village can do this with no loans, no permission, no PR, what's really stopping the rest of us? And if that question feels dangerous, maybe that's exactly why it matters.